It is. I forgot about that. It's
It is
Mardi
Mardi
Gras.
Gras. Hang out in the Holy Land, Land Grant Holy Lands podcast, episode 12. Eric Sheevy joining us for the first time. You know, it's always special the first time. Matt Brown back as always. Luke Zimmerman in the house. We're post signing day. Urban Meyer's already putting together a signing day, de facto signing day this past Sunday, bringing in 3 commitments. Paris Campbell, Lawrence Marshall, and Kyle Trout amongst the 2014 Buckeye pledges, up to 5, which seems impressive until you realize that Texas and Mac Brown, who may not even be there next year, already has 8. Unfortunately for him, Texas always gets like 1 million early junior commitments and then loses them all by signing day. So, anywho, lots going on in the Ohio State sphere that had nothing to do with recruiting, really nothing to do with anything. This is a weird pseudo-news 24-hour period in which there's so much non-news news. We'll go and kick it off with one of the biggest non-news stories of the last week. Ohio State and its new athletic logo. Ohio State unveiled not only a new logo for the diplomas, a university seal that looks like a small child drew a block O onto their historical 100-year-old mark, but they also unveiled a new athletic logo which literally looked like someone fired up MS Paint and colored in the white lines. You've seen it on the site. You've seen people discuss it. We hopped on 6:10 a.m. to talk about it in Columbus. To kind of just, go over our thoughts on it. And then we, also just really have made fun of it extensively on Twitter and in the site's comments. But we've had, give or take, a week now to digest this thing. It came out today that the university spent $45,000, which is a lot less than I think, most people would have thought. That was still an egregious sum of money on this quote-unquote redesign. Branches like this are tough. I'm not a professional designer. I know neither of you guys are, but let's just talk about our thoughts on it super briefly. Eric, you had some opinionated takes in the pre-show. Let us in on what your feelings are on this thing.
Well, in my old job, I often did some graphic design, and if I had given that logo to my boss, it would have been thrown back in my face. That it's just not very good. You can't see. There's no white space. You can't really read the fact that it says Ohio State. It's just hard to read, and it's not pleasing to the eye. And I think it just, like you said, it looks like someone just used the fill button in MS Paint and just filled in the blocks to be all black. It's kind of dumb.
Matt, give us your insight on the new Ohio State athletic logo.
I this might be unpopular now. It's kind of grown on me a little bit, and I think if we're being completely honest, the old logo wasn't exactly the Mona Lisa. It was kind of ugly with the white and the black. It felt kind of cluttered or really 80s-fied. And while this isn't a gigantic improvement, certainly it's not $45,000 worth of an improvement. I don't think it's terrible. It might be a little bit easier to read when it's on apparel or from farther away. I mean, if it was up to me, I would just go peel away all the lettering and just use the block O that served us.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Why not just use the block O?
That's one of the great design questions, because the block O not only is more historical, it goes back to the 50s, whereas the Athletico, as it's called, goes back to the 1980s, late 80s at that. It looks incredibly 80s. The bevel is certainly dead, and I don't think anyone's going to miss that. But the simple matter of fact is that I think, I'm going to blow some minds here, and contrary to my, indignance on 610 WTVN as well as on the site, it has grown on me a little bit.
Like a cancer.
Yeah, no, it's just like the red shoulder stripes, which I absolutely hated at the time. I actually like them more than the gray ones now. So who knows? Maybe in 5-7 years I'll feel differently. I think it does look quote unquote more modern, which means it's superficially modern. It's just different for the sake of different, and it's also simplistically different. So they obviously try to toe the line and not hurt anyone's feelings, which in the process made them hurt a lot of people's feelings. And I'm also usually radically pro-change for the sake of change, as crazy as that sounds. Like I like moving every 12 to 18 months. Maybe it comes from having lived in like 7 places in 4.5 years at Ohio State, but I like things being different. I like living in a different apartment. I like having a new cable provider. I like changing cell phone services, mostly because I'm crazy and insane. But this logo, though, initially didn't sit well. I agree with you guys. We also had that reader that chimed in with his own mock-ups of kind of what he thought the logo should be. I thought his strongest ones most predominantly incorporated the block O. Either way, we're stuck with it. I think I'm most curious what they're going to do with the monstrosity on the scoreboard that has the old Athletico. Are they just going to get up there with like black tempera paint and like paint it in? Like,
just Sharpie. They'll just go get some like poor athletic intern to go in there and just color it.
Just get the walk-ons, man. Let them run stadium stuff and climb that thing.
OSU football is hiring a new intern. Maybe that's his position. Maybe
Hey, you never know. Or we could also always just get Joe Boserman back and get him some paintball balloons or something and have him just like chunk them into that thing. But we digress. Shifting gears from athletic logos to something equally inane. A video we posted on the site last night about 9 p.m. was Urban Meyer at an Ohio football high school coaches clinic. Great talk from Meyer, typical motivational fare, emphasizing the importance of really rearing kids and not just rearing student athletes, making them more of a complete package of individuals as they graduate beyond football. The vast majority of his players, and especially high school players, will never have the luster and riches of NFL success. So you have to go ahead and just try and equip them as best as you can as young men and individuals for life. And he stresses all the good talking points and motivational stuff that you certainly like to hear, as my apartment apparently has an earthquake. Not really. But in all seriousness, the talk had this one kind of lighthearted moment where effectively Meyer paraphrased or still, I don't know how you even want to describe it. He talked about this tall tale about Earle Bruce and a turtle, and the internet kind of caught it and ran with it a little bit later, like at least the general internet, the broader college sports or sports internet, and sort of misconstrued it into being a Woody Hayes anecdote and being about a turtle biting Woody Hayes' member, as it were. It's a funny story no matter what, and it's obviously, anyone with half a mind knew it was not legitimate or at least incredibly embellished and fictionalized. I mean, the thing is, one, as an Ohio State fan, Meyer told the same story last year, and where it just gets incredibly stupid. I don't know what's dumber. First and foremost, Jerry Emig, the director of communications for the football team, kind of the SID of athletics for the football program, having to issue a statement clarifying that not only was it actually about Coach Bruce, but that it was embellished and fictionalized. Or two, the pure indignance we saw from professional paid sports writers on the beats. I know we're hobbyists. It allows us to have a little bit more of a fan vantage, but thank God no one that writes for this site went on the internet to decree the wasting everyone's time. I mean, it's distraction, and the story is funny either way. I don't think it loses anything. You guys have any thoughts on this?
I was a little bit more shocked by all of the pushback, I guess, from the beat writer community after the press release. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe Ohio State had to debase themselves by having to issue this press release, and oh my gosh, these irresponsible bloggers. I mean, it's funny. And it's the football offseason, and a lot of what we write about are the things that people are interested in are things that are funny. Woody Hayes has this kind of mythology built around him that's kind of Schnelly-esque, where, like, obviously that's completely embellished, but this guy punched another football player on national television. I mean, there's all these other things around him. Like, really? Like, we're going to say, like, that's so completely impossible? There's that shred of believability, and even if it's obviously complete hogwash, it's funny. So I don't regret making a reference to it on Twitter. I don't regret retweeting anybody else. And I certainly am never going to lose sleep that I caused an SID to have to write a press release over something ridiculous. That's really kind of the least of my concerns. It's a funny story.
Eric, any thoughts on this?
He was laughing as he wrote. SID was laughing as he wrote the press release. I mean, come on, the internet is obsessed with whimsy, and anytime that you have to, anytime that you have to worry about sports writers getting all up in arms over something that's a joke and something that's obviously just somebody trying to be funny, it kind of takes away from the jokes and the fun a little bit, It's all about it. Blogging is fun, and it's fun to make a joke once in a while. You don't have to, take it super seriously. And I think that's what the people who got all offended at the Ohio State press release are missing. That, this whole thing is just it's one big joke, and it's something that I didn't take any part in, but I certainly watched from afar, and I just thought it was hilarious the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, we not only I watched the video last night when I wrote a video post up on the site, pointed out that it was Bruce, but yeah, I pointed out the anecdote because to me the takeaway was Meyer giving this great motivational talk. It wasn't this joke. Now, granted, we probably could have gotten way more traffic if we'd emphasized the turtle penis part, which lesson to take away if you want to get page views in a hurry, write about turtles and penises. But
we're a sports blog. We missed a chance for the layup dick joke. I mean, nobody can ever accuse us of like SEO whoring ever again if we purposely did not put dick in the lead.
No, I mean, we have to go with Urban Meyer, Woody Hayes, Earle Bruce penis in every single headline from here on out, I think, is the true takeaway. Right.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, I mean, Jerry Emig is by all accounts a nice guy, easy to deal with. Not the biggest fan of Web 2.0 or the advanced media. I mean, it took the Buckeye Battle Cry and 11 Warriors a really long time, especially after he took over for his predecessor, who was a lot more respectful of kind of the impact that these major blog sites have. He's not a guy that is fast to give out full credentials. I mean, it took literally 11 Warriors having to hire a guy that Emig knew from a previous business relationship, from having been a graduate student, having worked covering it for a different entity. I mean, if that's what it takes to get a... I mean, we're obviously not by any means bending over backwards to university to try to get credentialed. We'd certainly take the opportunity if we have it. We've got plenty of guys in Columbus and would love to give that first-hand fan impression. But it's not something that we need, and it's not something that I think any blog needs. And if he doesn't want to recognize the fact that the internet is more about levity and about, really the people that are reading these sites, I mean, even the people that are reading the pay sites, they want a distraction from the mundane existence of their day jobs. They want to read about these possible future Ohio State football players. They want to read about Bryante Dunn getting arrested last July or whatever when that broke. I mean, they want to read about interesting things pertaining to their hobbies. And Ohio State football goes even beyond a hobby for so many people in the Midwest and beyond. And it's just like, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, and you can't teach an old SID about the internet overnight. And the university even feels a need, I mean, to acknowledge something like that seems like an utter waste of time. When I saw someone saying, like, whatever Ohio State's paying Jerry Emig, he should get a raise for having to cover things like this. It's like, well, maybe they should actually hire an SIT that's more in tune with the times. Maybe actually think back to Tennessee's SIT, who's finally retiring. This is a guy that he wouldn't even credential Rivals.com or Scout.com writers, like people that we consider to be like true beat writers, because he hadn't heard of their entities. He said if they didn't have a print equivalent, that they weren't actually beat writers. And this was like something that was happening in 2012. So
yeah, these are the people that wouldn't give a credential to EDSBS when, if their circulation is certainly larger than a lot of small southern newspapers.
Yeah, I mean, there's no...
It is what it is.
You could add together, EDSBS isn't necessarily the year-round power that some of the top free sites or pay sites in the Ohio State blogosphere are, but EDSBS during the heat of fall season, or anytime Spencer writes just like a true home run column, I mean, the traffic that does is more than some sites' signing days. So
there's 1,000 comments on every post.
Yeah, I mean, literally, the community is there, and certainly the traffic may not be there in the off season, but Spencer Hall is obviously a name in and of itself. I mean, the guy is effectively the editor-in-chief of SB Nation as a whole now, which is a huge entity in and of itself. Yeah. He has trouble getting credentialed from some of these schools. I'd like to think that Ohio State is beyond that. They're not quite at this point, but Emig is a totally decent guy by all regards. He was actually great to our own DJ Burns, who retired from the site this past fall. He pointed out DJ at press conferences when DJ covered them, when DJ and I were at our previous stop on the internet, and was always very good to him. So credit where credit's due. If he likes DJ, I'm good with him. But moving on to actual sports things, there still are Ohio State-related sports things going on. Baseball's about to get going, and maybe we can bring on Chris Webb here in a week or so to talk about that. In the interim, there is Ohio State basketball. The men's basketball team is still a top 15, top 20 caliber team. Where they end up when everything's said and done in March remains to be seen. They're still very much a work in progress in a week that saw them lose consecutive games. But the medicine that ails them might be coming on Valentine's Day in the form of an incredibly dinged up Northwestern side heading to Columbus. Northwestern's, two of their top rebounders, Jared Swapshire, who's I think out for the year, right?
Yep.
And Alex Ola, who has a concussion, will both be out. I can't imagine before this game being like, well, Northwestern doesn't have their interior presences. Amir Williams is going to totally go off. But if they don't have two interior presences, it's not necessarily out of the question that Williams or Ravenel actually has themselves, 10 points.
They'll have to. I mean, they're not going to have a chance like this the rest of the season. Not only is Northwestern missing those two, they're missing Drew Crawford, who going into the season was going to be their number one scoring threat, really one of the conference's top players outside of the first team all conference type. So this is their shooting guard is 6'4", I think, is averaging around 4 rebounds a game, and then there's nobody else that's dressing that's averaging more than 2.8. And as a team, even with those two guys there, they're really one of the worst rebounding and one of the worst offensive teams in the Big Ten and rebounding-wise, really in the country. So while front court depth, especially I think scoring-wise, is not something that I would consider a real strength of Ohio State, they should be able to absolutely punish Northwestern down low, completely limit them to one contested shot, probably a three-pointer, and then use that to get out in transition. Northwestern, I think, is like a much, much, much worse version of Ohio State in the sense that they're not somebody who's really going to be able to score more than 70 points. They're not a great. They're perimeter guard focused, but they obviously don't have Deshaun Thompson. They don't defend nearly as well as OSU. So this is a game at home. If they're focused, they should be able to win pretty comfortably.
Yeah, Ohio State seems to struggle a lot with these teams that slow it down, like Northwestern in the past. But now I think they're becoming one of the teams that actually does slow it down. They tried to do that to Indiana with mixed results at best. But for Northwestern, Dan Shurna is not walking through that door. They're gonna struggle in this game this week, and I don't see any way that Ohio State is not going to win by 50 or more points because of what Matt brought up with the interior press and the fact that their guards are just, without Drew Crawford, their guards just can't match up offensively with the defense of Aaron Craft and Shannon Scott, who's really been coming on lately, who's almost as tenacious as Craft. I think he takes his cue from the veteran Craft on the court. So we could be headed for a blowout here, and I think Northwestern is maybe back to just Northwestern status, unfortunately.
Yeah, at least certainly, they won their bowl game for the first time ever in football. We talked about this maybe being the other night they won a bowl game, but maybe with Drew Crawford, do they make that run to the NCAAs that has, slipped beyond their grasp for basically ever? No John Shurna, certainly no, not even the big current guys that they have. I have a hard time seeing this.
Sorry.
No. Hey, New York Knicks gotta respect the 12th or 15th man or whatever he is there. He's there. I jest, but no, I mean certainly the Crawford loss is about the same as Tim Frazier's impact at Penn State. I mean, those are their two best players for each of these respective teams. You don't have those guys. I mean, losing the other guys is just insult to injury. So effectively, Northwestern's missing 3 of their best players, and if you're missing 3 starters, imagine Ohio State without their 3 best players. It'd be a nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Northwestern was going to be a tournament team this year, even if nobody had gotten hurt. But I do think that it's fair to say it's a program that's on its way up. They play a lot of freshmen and people who I think are fairly well regarded as far as Northwestern basketball recruits are concerned. People who were getting rival scores up in the high 80s. Olha is a 7-footer, and I think Northwestern has really consistently struggled to be able to bring in size or somebody who can rebound. I mean, there's typically a pretty steep learning curve for college big men, and since I don't think they have anyone on their team that's really at a risk for leaving for the NBA in a year or two as their freshman class sorts of matures a little bit, I think then we'll be looking at seeing the end of the proverbial curse. But
are you saying Northwestern has no NBA draft prospects? How dare you, sir?
That is madness.
And
come at me, Chicago's Big Ten team.
It's not actually in Chicago. In the best conference in college basketball in the world, you're saying there's a team without a single NBA prospect. No, I mean, if John Shurna can make an NBA roster, and we actually don't know offhand if he did or not, live. This podcast is recorded live with no action.
I don't think he's on the Knicks. He
only got cut in spring training.
I think he got cut in summer league.
Oh, that wouldn't surprise me. I mean, he was a good shooter, but
he was an incredible shooter.
Not a whole lot of other, NBA-ready skills. He's apparently for the Knicks, he was no Steve Novak.
Yeah, Steve Novak is something else. Another Midwest guy. If John Shurna couldn't cut it at the professional ranks, I mean, who could, right? I mean,
Deshaun Thomas really should just quit. Get an engineering degree. There's no hope.
In all seriousness, I did go ahead and muster here some quick insight on John Shurna. He apparently signed a partially guaranteed contract with the Knicks, but was cut at the end of preseason. Just barely missed out on the roster. So that's a great showing. I mean, honestly, for him to have made it that far to the final cut. Yeah, no, here's the craziest part is, so this past December he actually decided to go abroad, which for a guy of his skill set, I mean, he's a perfect European big, right?
Mhm.
He should go and just pop a bunch of threes. Yeah, so he's apparently playing for Strasbourg of the French league. So hey, John Shurna, he's making more money than we'll probably make in like 5 to 10 years of our professional lives shooting three-pointers in France. So credit where credit's due, sir.
We're not hated.
Terrence
And
Dials,
we have spent 5 minutes on John Shurna.
nothing wrong with that. Anyway, we've covered Ohio State's ugly new athletic logo. We talked a little bit about. I hate the phrase "anything gate" because there's nothing more intellectually lazy than that. So we'll just call it Turtle Penis Soap Opera. We talked about that. We talked about Ohio. Well, not safe for work. Not in this podcast anyway. We talked also as well about the forthcoming Northwestern-Ohio State game. It's going to be tomorrow when this podcast goes live on the internet. So when you listen to it, it may have already happened on Thursday or Friday, but we digress. Ohio State certainly has to be comfortable favorites on that one. If you want to watch the game to feel good about Ohio State's basketball chances after a loss, to Indiana, a loss to Michigan, this is going to be the one to watch. Watch it before the game this coming weekend. I promise you that one will be a slightly higher blood pressure inducing, let's just say. Anyway, joining me, Eric Sheevy, Matt Brown, Hangout in the Holy Land, the 12th episode, coming at you again soon. Go Buckeyes.
Go Buckeyes.
Go Bucks.